So, here we go. This is first day we sort of give the trailer for the class, Religions of India. So first I'll go over the course requirements, and then we'll talk about the content of the class. I sent out a syllabus today by email, so some of you may not have gotten that. And if you can't open it or didn't get it, just let me know. Requirements of the class are, there's two papers, each one about approximately 7 to 8 pages, and the first one's due about halfway through the semester, and the second one's due toward the end of the semester. And the other third of the grade is simply, as I put in the syllabus, being physically and mentally present for the classes. The books we're going to read are, of course, important, have a lot of valuable information. At the same time, the class is really here. This is really the class, what we're going to do here. And the books are meant to support what we do here. So you do have to come. And in the syllabus, you'll find that for every class, of course, not today, there's a little homework assignment. The homework assignment basically is just a way to try to, I don't want to say coerce, try to encourage you to do the reading. And so basically, I mean, for every class, there's a reading, and the homework assignment is not going to be graded. It doesn't have to be anything special. It's basically just write a half page just to show that you read the assignment. That's about all it is. Last semester, it kind of went between extremes. In the beginning, the students were kind of in anxiety about it, so they were writing a couple pages, which I felt was too much work to ask for every class, and then it went to the other extreme of sometimes just like a sentence or two. So basically, it's just a way for you to take a few notes on what you read. As I said, it's not graded, and it's not meant to be, it doesn't even have to be great English. It's not part of the Gordon rule thing. It's just a few notes of your own, which hopefully will be useful to you. And also, another thing is it actually verifies that you attended the class. So I keep track of the attendance, which may seem old-fashioned and cruel, but I do keep track of the attendance. And so if for some reason you are not able to do the homework assignment, come on in. So a few good seats left. If for some reason you're not able to do the homework assignment, at least write your name down on a piece of paper and turn it in, so at least you get credit for being there. So whenever you do come to class, please just leave something on the desk. You can just drop it off, so just to get credit for being there. As far as grading, I am not a severe grader. I don't think I'm like foolishly easy, but I tend to err on the side of generosity. And I mean, the world is already stressful enough, so I try to do everything possible to reduce your stress in taking this course. So if you just participate, just come to the class and do your part and participate and try your best, I mean, you'll get, the worst that can happen is you'll get a good grade. And if you really put out some effort, you'll get a very good grade. So the grade is not really going to be a problem if you just participate. And the emphasis is really on trying to learn something. So for the duration, for those of you who take the class, hope you all will. For the duration of the semester, this is a little learning community. And all of you, by coming to the class and participating, whether you ask questions or not, just by your being here, I hate to use such, language as your energy or whatever, but just by your being here, it actually contributes something. And so the class is a little community, and we'll do this together, this very important topic. So any question on the class requirements? Yes?
What is the format of the paper?
Oh, right. That's a very good question. The paper. I will send you something in the very near future regarding the paper. The format will be decent English, and I mean, as far as the technical things like footnoting and all that, I don't care that much about it. I think I'm supposed to care more than I do. But as far as the topics of the paper,
yeah, is it like a research paper, or is it?
Yeah, it should involve some original research. Some of you may even be bold and go beyond Wikipedia. So, yeah, it's not. Again, I mean, it's not something which will I don't know, harm your life by it. It's just, do a little research, look up a few things, show that you've thought about it. And, you will have a lot of freedom in choosing your topic, but there will be some parameters. And I'll explain all that, and if it's not clear, I'll explain it better.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So, any other questions on the class requirements? No. Okay. The class. Well, first of all, I think we'll have a lot of fun for various reasons, but the religions of India is, I think there's really no more important topic or no more important subject in university on rational grounds for the following reasons. Number one, I think religion is extremely important. I was just reading there's a Jane Austen book, Mansfield Park, which is a little debate, about the importance of religion. Religion, I think, can and often does ask the most important questions of life, like who are we, where do we come from, what's our real identity? Come on in. Do we have a real identity? Because some Indian philosophies taught that we don't have a real identity. And the very notion of thinking you are someone is itself the problem. That's, especially in Buddhism, they somehow came up with that. So, we are going to talk about those important things. We are going to mention things. Another customer. So, we are going to cover things like ritual and, details of ethnic details, but basically we're going to focus on big ideas. What does it all mean? What were people really doing? What were they feeling? And what was their motive? And what did they think they were accomplishing? What were the answers they gave to the important questions of life? Things like that. So that's religion in general. India in particular is perhaps the best possible place to study religion, I think, for the following. In India, as far back as you can go in Indian history, even in the Indian proto-history and prehistory, whatever the difference is between those two, there has been freedom. They've actually had freedom of religion. India was precociously civilized. So that in the earliest literature, the Rig Veda, you find statements such as that there's one God or there's one absolute truth, which is addressed in different ways and invoked by different names, but there's actually only one ultimate truth. There was a freedom of religion. There was actually political freedom as well in very ancient texts. Going back thousands of years, we find that you could go out into the town square and criticize the king, and it wasn't off with your head. People actually had the freedom to criticize the government. They had the freedom to choose their own religion. You have the rise of Buddhism around 2,500 years ago in an India which already had a very powerful religious tradition to which people were very attached. Buddhism, and we'll talk much more about this later, made very strong criticisms of the existing Vedic religion. They said it was basically wrong, if not nonsense. And so you had this other religion that could arise, very much attack the existing religion, and that there were no wars fought over it. There was no blood spilled over this. They just debated it for the most part. And, I mean, there's always skeletons in the closet of every old civilization, so there were some kings that got out of control and did bad things. But in general, you could have powerful religion, you could have another religion arise, make the heaviest possible criticisms of it, and no one fights over it. They just fight with words. They debate it. So in India, another fact about India is that there's always been a lot of people in India, I mean, compared to the world population. And so when you have a lot of people and a lot of intelligent people, India came up with things like, zero in mathematics, the Indian study of language. After all, any philosophy that you may be interested in, or theology, is expressed in words. Even, again, religions that denied the usefulness of language, religions that talked about a truth which is beyond words, that you can't express in words, usually those religions wrote more books than anybody else, which is ironic, and we'll talk about that irony. But anyway, whatever your philosophy is, whatever your religion is, people generally communicate it and express it with words. And so this was recognized thousands of years ago in India, and they developed thousands of years ago by far the most sophisticated study of language in the world, so that the modern academic discipline of linguistics really arose from the discovery of ancient Sanskrit grammar. When Europeans went to Europe with the highest motives, when Europeans went to India, when Europeans went to India and discovered Sanskrit, and we'll talk about that, that's a whole subject, the shock, the cultural shock that came from the discovery of Sanskrit, and the recognition in, a highly racist, colonialist 18th century Europe, toward the end of the 18th century, the discovery that all of these non-white people in South Asia were actually part of the family. Because of the Indo-European issue, the discovery of Sanskrit as an Indo-European language, the understanding that the ancient Indian civilization was inseparably linked to ancient Western civilization. And the discovery that in ancient times people in India had studied language in a way that was literally thousands of years ahead of Europe, and completely transformed the study of language in Europe and created the modern academic field of linguistics. So people in India there were many bright people, actually, in India. There still are. And so they studied language in a very sophisticated way, so their discussions of theology, of philosophy, were on a very high level because of their attention to language. So if you put all these things together, one more factor is that as early as we can observe Indian history, people had a very strong inclination toward religion. They took very seriously spiritual issues, the soul, or God, or religion in general. What is the material world? There's the world as it presents itself to us, the physical world, the world you see when you just open your eyes and look out your window or whatever. But then is there something more to the world? Is there some deeper meaning to the world? Where does it come from? And where do we come from, and who are we? So there was always a strong inclination to understand these things in India. So basically you have a lot of people, many of whom are very bright, with a strong inclination to understand religion and spirituality, and a very high level of freedom. And when you put all those two together, you get every conceivable kind of religion. A lot of bright, spiritually minded people with freedom, and a very long time span. So if you put all that together, basically you get the full spectrum of human religiosity. Plus, at least two of the most important world religions, most important in a neutral sense, the religions that had the most historical impact. Not important in the sense that they're more true necessarily, but in terms of their impact on world history. Of course, you have Hinduism and Buddhism, other religions that didn't quite expand as much, like Jainism. Sikhism has 20 to 30 million members, depending on which website you go to. So apart from these world religions that actually came from India, the other important world religions, again important in the sense of their impact on world history, basically came from the Middle East, the three Abrahamic or Middle Eastern traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They went to India for various reasons, the main one of which, of course, was greed. So they went to India. So Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they're all in India. So basically all the world religions, again, because of the freedom, are in India. And one of the reasons India was always so populated, nothing like it is today, is because it's a very rich land. The land itself is very rich. It has one of the best river systems in the world. It has every imaginable climate. Jungles, deserts, the highest mountains in the world. It had unlimited natural resources and so on. And so it's a very interesting country. It's a very interesting country. And even in ancient times, we have reports from, for example, the Greek ambassador Megasthenes. About 2,300 years ago, he wrote a book on India called Indica, which in Greek means on India. And in that book, he describes a sophisticated civilization with human rights, extremely prosperous, probably the richest country in the world at the time. Marco Polo also talks about the wealth of India. After 1,000 years of colonial rule and exploitation, of course, it's not such a rich country, but it's building back up. So here are just a few numbers. Second largest country in the world in population, and maybe the largest country in population before too long. It has 1/5 to 1/6 of all the people in the world, about 1.3 billion. Second fastest growing economy, the fourth largest economy in the world, the largest democracy of the world, and one of the freest presses. So not only in terms of providing an extraordinary, perhaps a unique picture of human religiosity, it's also just an important country nowadays. So any questions on that so far? That's not. Moving right along. What else? We talked about the big questions. We're going to be talking about other big questions like theodicy, which is a very important issue. You all know what theodicy is? Philosophical term? No. Greek word theos means God, and the Greek word dike means justice. So theodicy means the justice of God. Also called in philosophy the problem of evil. Basically, if there is a triple O God, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, all good, all strong, and all-knowing, if there is such a God, why is this world such an incredible mess? And why are we suffering? I mean, naturally, let's say you go into a store and you're not satisfied with the way you're treated. What do people often say? I want to talk to the manager. Who's in charge here? And so it's the same thing. When you're born on planet Earth and you notice it's kind of a mess and things don't always go the way they should, people think, I want to talk to the manager. In other words, God, or whoever's ruling, or a goddess, or some kind of divine power. So this attitude that who's in charge here, I want to talk to who's ever in charge, is a common thing. So the problem of suffering, why are we suffering? That question is always addressed by religions in their philosophical dimension, and this question was very strongly addressed in India. It still is. What is the role of religion in society? For example, we'll study the Sikh religion. At a certain point where they had to make a decision, they were basically being harassed, if not persecuted, by the Mughal Empire. This is approximately 400 years ago, 500 years ago. And so they had to make a decision, either to totally withdraw from politics or to militarize, to become essentially a military religious community. And they chose the latter. So this gets into interesting issues which are of universal concern. What's the role of religion? Is it ever justified for a religion to choose the path of militarization? And so on. Another thing we're going to be talking about in terms of universal themes is what I call the economy of religion. And I don't just mean, how religions make their money. By economy in a broader sense doesn't just mean business. It means supply and demand. That people want something, other people have what they want, and they negotiate it. And if people have what you want, you're going to go to them. If they don't have what you want, you won't. And people that bring to the market, whether it's the marketplace of ideas, or the marketplace of, cheap liquor, whatever marketplace it is, if you bring to the marketplace what people want, then you're going to survive and flourish. And if you don't, you're probably not going to survive. And so people, as history shows very clearly, have certain basic religious needs. And you can see it so much that even in atheistic humanism, they take on all the sociological and psychological structures of a religion, of priests. That's something that people that do the sociology of, how do you call it, of philosophy. Anyway, don't get too technical here. People tend to be religious. They have certain religious needs. People want to know, where did I come from? Where am I going? My father died. Where did he go? And my children, I want them to be safe. How can I somehow invoke some kind of higher power for the safety of my children? People have certain basic religious needs. And then there are, apart from universal human religious needs, there are specific historical circumstances. So that history tends to shape religions. You see this in every religion. You see it in basically all the religions we'll talk about, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism. How you get these religions that begin or that have this enthusiasm to change the world we're going to change the world, we're going to make it a better place, we're going to bring light to a dark world, bring knowledge, social justice. So they want to change the world, but they become transformed by the world over time. So to what extent are these religions we're talking about, to what extent is history a product of these religions? To what extent are these religions products of history? And so we'll talk, that's another, I think, a universal theme, which is not merely relevant to India. Any questions on that so far? No? Moving right along. Methodology. Okay, relevance, big questions, POV, still on message here. POV is a term used in literature. It's a term used in, say, novel writing or short stories, which means point of view. In other words, let's say you go to a movie or you're reading a book. Are you seeing the world through the point of view of the heroine, the hero, the villain, or there's what is called the omniscient narrator? In other words, is the author simply looking down at the story and the author kind of knows everything and lets you know certain facts at different times? So whose point of view are we seeing through? In the same way when we study religion, whose point of view are we getting? And so basically, historically I think there have been roughly, anyway, slight redundancy there, roughly there have been 3 points of view in the scholarly study of religion. Up until not too long ago, and this influences, by the way, what you can get in your textbooks, because your textbooks are very much coming out of that history of the study of religion. Up till not too long ago, religion was studied in seminaries or in religious communities. If you wanted to study Christianity, you went to a Christian seminary. If you wanted to study Judaism, you went to a Jewish seminary, and so on and so forth. Anyway, with the increasing secularization of the world and, times change, religion was adopted. The study of religion was taken into the secular academy. I mean, universities themselves used to be religious schools. All the great Western universities, whether, the University of Paris or Oxford or Cambridge, and so on and so forth, all these universities were originally church schools. So all these universities started as religious schools, and they became secular and sort of booted out religion. That's the whole intellectual history of the West. And then religion came back in. But when religion came back into the university, it was kind of a second-class citizen. Because if you study Western intellectual history, the Western academy kind of defined itself as being rational and scientific and not dogmatic and religious. And that gets into the whole, the French Revolution, all that stuff, the whole age of Enlightenment in the 18th century, the attack on metaphysics and so on, the 19th century, that whole battle between religion and worldly science, worldly reason. By the way, they used to be together. Religion and science used to be together up until the Reformation, Protestant Reformation. It was the Reformation. The Protestants sort of kicked out science. They thought it was irrelevant. Luther said sola scriptura, only Scripture. Anyway, so there was a divorce between science and religion. We take now for granted, the subjective and the objective realm among people who are kind of naive about epistemology. Anyway, so then religion came back into the university at a certain point in the 20th century, but with great suspicion. And so mundane scholars of religion adopted an approach called methodological atheism. And this was actually the official approach to the academic study of religion until not too long ago. Methodological atheism means that if you're studying a particular religion, you should assume for the purpose of your study that all of that religion's spiritual claims are false. For example, if you were trying to explain why the movement of Jesus of Nazareth spread so quickly, well, not so quickly, but once it got going, it picked up a lot of steam, or why Islam spread so explosively at a certain point in history, you should assume for the purpose of your historical analysis that there's no God, Jesus is not, in other words, it's not, as a Christian might say, that God favored us or God had a plan this was meant to be, you should assume that's false. You should assume that's not true. And if people claim, for example, that we have joined this religion because we had spiritual experiences, we realize that actually I have an eternal soul that I want to save, you should assume for the purpose of your study there is no such thing as an eternal soul. And why should you assume all these things? Because that will force you to come up with more rational scientific explanations. In other words, if a shaman claims to have a mystical experience, you should look for a physiological explanation. The shaman, has ingested some kind of super heavy-duty South American tobacco from the Amazon jungle, and the shaman is having basically it's all physiological, or it's psychological. Some people claim there's a God because, they need a psychological crutch, ignoring the view that atheism also can be a wonderful psychological crutch for one's vanity and self-centeredness. But anyway, so this methodological atheism was the official doctrine. I once had a knockdown, drag-out debate with a gentleman who at that time was the head of the religion department at Southern Methodist University, who was defending to the last breath methodological atheism. Now, what changed this is postmodernism. Basically, among other things, a lot of ladies got into academics and just had a little more common sense in this. And they began to see this very sort of hard, whatever, approach as being basically irrational. Because as a scholar, you can't say there's a soul or not a soul, or there's a God or not a God. You can't say that as a scholar. You may have personal views on it. And so methodological atheism is actually... it's actually nonsense. I'll explain in a second more why it's nonsense. So nowadays, there's a more balanced approach. So there's one point of view, which is the true believer. We're going to study Indian religions, and we're going to believe in them. As we study them, we're going to accept it. Everything they say about this world and the next is true. And then the other extreme is to assume, which was the equal and opposite reaction to that approach, was that let's assume all these spiritual claims are false. They're all wrong, and we need to look for physiological, psychological, and sociological explanations of what's going on here. Now, thankfully, things are coming back to the middle. So as a scholar of religion, which will be here, or simulate scholars of religion, we have to take a balanced approach. And I want to give an example of, of something. We have in our culture a very common expression, blind faith. And no self-respecting, educated human being wants to be guilty of blind faith. However, we do not have an expression in our culture, blind doubt. Now, if you believe something which is not true, or if you doubt something which is true, you're equally clueless. I mean, you got it wrong. Let's say, for example, there's a fire in a building, and you're told that you have to escape through this, say an authorized person comes and says, go this way, and you doubt that. It may cost you your life. Or let's say, for example, someone has serious emotional issues, and they're afraid to get out of bed in the morning because they doubt that the earth will somehow be solid beneath their feet, and the only solid place left on earth is their bed. Now, so you can see how by doubting things that are true, you can really go nuts. Or if you believe things that aren't true, if you believe the world, let's say there's a giant pink rabbit who's stalking you. So, in other words, to believe what is true, or to doubt what is not true, or to reject what is true, are equally wrong. And yet in our culture, which is tilted towards skepticism, skepticism, by the way, is not just the natural attitude of an intelligent person. Skepticism is a specific philosophical position which has a history. It's not just, it's a particular philosophy, skepticism. So we have the phrase blind faith, but not blind doubt, because our culture is prejudiced against belief because of certain extremely nasty set of historical facts related to religion. But anyway, so let's say, for example, here's something you never could have guessed by yourself because you're still students. So, that's an equation. And if, let's say, we say, okay, 2 and 2 is 4, and 2 and 2 is not 5. Now, if I affirm this, if I say this is correct, if I mark this correct and I mark this wrong, in both cases I'm making a claim about math. In other words, both of these statements, 2 and 2 equals 4, 2 and 2 does not equal 5, these are both equally statements about math. And to make both of those statements requires the same knowledge. Unless I knew this was true, I would not know that this was not true. And therefore, to affirm any of these, this positive or negative claim, I'm claiming that I know the real answer. So now, to apply this to a religious thing, in India, Indra is basically Zeus. You know, your generic Zeus, the god of rain and thunder and all that, king of the gods. So if let's say I do an equation, and I say Indra is the rain god. Or, let's say I write this, that Indra is not the rain god. In other words, there's no such thing as Indra. And I say that, and I give the typical, the almost unbelievably naive claim, which you often find in textbooks, that back in ancient times, people saw thunder and lightning, and it, just scared the bejeebies out of them, and therefore they didn't know what to do, so by projecting some kind of personal identity onto the power of the weather, they felt they could somehow, get a handle on this, and they could pray to some god of rain and thunder. Now, the people that write these textbooks were never actually there at the time. They never actually witnessed this taking place. And I think this is extremely naive to think that way, that people back then were that dumb. But in any case, by this analogy between theology, this is a theological statement. Indra is generally not taken as the supreme god in India, but this is a theological statement. This is a claim, a religious claim, that Indra is the rain god. My point is, this is equally a religious claim. If you say, in an academic environment, Indra is not the rain god, that is equally a religious claim. Now, in public universities in this country, like this one, for example, if I stand before you and I try to convince you that Indra is the god of rain, I'll be terminated. I can't do that. I can't stand up in a public university and tell you seriously Indra is the rain god. However, I am free to stand up and tell you that Indra is not the rain god. If I give you some naive, reductive argument that this is all due to sociological factors, psychological factors, and as we all know, there really isn't a rain god, I can do that. I won't get in trouble for doing that, even though I'm equally making a religious claim. So I just wanted to point that out when you read your textbooks, that we live in a culture in which there's a bias in favor of skepticism and against faith. So I'm not going to do either. I'm just going to try to present the facts neutrally. Any questions on that? This is a very important epistemological point, because at the present time in American public universities, you can preach religion as long as you do it negatively. You just can't do it positively. And just as these are both equally mathematical claims, these are both equally religious claims. So we're going to try to stay in the middle and be descriptive.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Is it just in America, or do other countries, can they talk about it, or is it only like private schools where they're allowed to say, oh, this is, but obviously you know what you're getting into if you just say
Western Europe tends to be not as, in some Western European environments, not quite as fanatical. In America, it's like Newtonian cultural physics, reaction, equal and opposite reaction. Because in America there's a very powerful evangelical presence, and therefore the academic community has kind of reacted very strongly, so you have this very polemical, anti-religious thing. To give one simple example, there's a battle going on in this country over evolution theory versus intelligent design theory. And the American judiciary consistently throws out attempts to teach intelligent design in the schools on the grounds that you have to keep religion and state and religion separate. Now, I find this very amusing and somewhat pathetic for the following reason. Intelligent design theory is actually a perennial philosophical position, a secular philosophical position which has existed in Western culture for many, many centuries before the appearance of Jesus. It's actually a philosophical position, which I guess the judges aren't aware of. So, in any case, it may be used by a religion. It may be used by a religion for their religious purposes, but ultimately, historically, it's actually a philosophical position which predates by half a millennium the appearance of Christianity in the world. But these are the culture wars that go back and forth. Anyway, back to India. No questions on that so far? We are going to talk about the history of India. And, I mean, in general, we're going to be thematic in the sense that we're going to focus on different great themes in Indian religion. We're going to talk about Buddhism and, of course, Hinduism and Jainism and Sikhism and the earlier Vedic religion. However, we're roughly going to go in a historical way, and we're going to work within a historical dialectic. You all know what dialectic is, right? You know, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, like something is going on. The status quo, something else opposes it, and they kind of wrestle with each other for a while, and something new comes out of it. So, very roughly, the historical framework of the class will be this. There was a very ancient Vedic religion, Indo-European religion, you could say, thousands and thousands of years ago, attested in books like the Rig Veda. This was going on for quite some time, and then within that society, within ancient India, some people were dissatisfied. They were dissatisfied because the culture had kind of developed a rigid caste system, which some people found oppressive. They were dissatisfied because religious rituals such as sacrifice were becoming, you could say, from the point of view of many people that objected, abused, so that it became sort of like an ancient Indian kosher meat industry. In other words, there were certain animal sacrifices, and these animal sacrifices were being exploited so that there was so much violence against animals that there was a reaction against this. And the reaction took the form of things like Buddhism and Jainism and even re-articulated forms of Hinduism. So you have a religion going on, there are objections to it, it's becoming corrupted in certain ways according to certain people, and then there's an antithesis, a reaction against it. And then when those two interact, we'll study the interaction, this cultural war, really, between the old Vedic religion on the one hand and Buddhism and Jainism on the other. And the result of this is that something new emerges, which is what we could call Hinduism. So Hinduism, to a great extent, comes out of this conflict between these two ancient traditions. And then you have Hinduism that just goes rolling along for a while, and Buddhism practically becomes reassimilated into the Vedic fold in the form of Hinduism. And then there's another major bombshell, you could say, and that is about 1,000 years ago, there's a Muslim invasion of India. An extremely violent invasion by a group of people who have very fanatical views about religion, who do not have the habit of fostering freedom of religion. And so you get another dialectic between Hinduism and Islam. And as a result of this dialectic, again something new emerges, which you could call modern Hinduism. And so, and now, you could say there's a third dialectic taking place, which we'll talk about toward the end of the course, and that is Hinduism and Islam in India coming into conflict with modernity. The fact that the world's becoming globalized, the world's becoming westernized, and how does this affect Hinduism? So we're going to trace this entire history, and we're going to look at the philosophical aspects of it, the spiritual, religious aspects of it, and so on. But we're roughly going to work within this historical framework. And any questions on that? We're going to cover a lot of material. It's actually quite interesting. We did this course last semester, and there's a lot of amazing things in there. I mean, a lot of amazing things happened in the last several thousand years in South Asia, which hopefully will teach us a lot about life in general and religion in general. and what it means to be a human being in this world. So, one last point, and then maybe get out a little early. And that is, as we go on through the course, we're going to give special attention, not majority attention, but some attention to the Bhagavad Gita. For a simple reason, from our textbook, page 154 of our text, one of our main textbook, Introducing Hinduism, the author, Professor Rodriguez, says that the enormous influence of the Bhagavad Gita makes it worth special consideration. And he also says the Bhagavad Gita enjoys a remarkable authority and sanctity among contemporary Hindus. So the Bhagavad Gita, we talked about dialectic. The Bhagavad Gita itself is a synthetic work. I don't mean to say it's made out of nylon. But it's a synthetic work in the sense that when the Bhagavad Gita first appeared thousands of years ago, it sort of took all the variety, all the main religious and spiritual ways of thinking, all the different traditions and paths, and kind of worked them all together and created a grand synthesis. So the Bhagavad Gita itself, and even to this day, it's by far the most important single book of Hinduism, and it has a very powerful way of looking at the world, and has a way of looking at religion. It has its own, talking about point of view, the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps the single most important book from the Indian tradition, has a sophisticated view of religion itself, and a view of the variety of religion. Why are there different religions in the world? And why do people psychologically choose different religions? And so on. And the answer it gives is not dogmatic. It's not because some people are condemned and some people are blessed. The answer it gives is psychological and philosophical. So there is a psychological explanation of religious variety in the Bhagavad Gita itself, which we'll discuss later. Yes?
Just a class-related question.
Yes, please.
Is the specific edition that you have posted online, is that necessary, or if we already have it, do we need to get a new one?
Considering the economic state of this country, no, you can use what you already have. Of course, I guess I should encourage you to consume more and buy another one. There is an introduction that we'll be reading to the Gita, but you could just, we could somehow get you a copy of it, or some friend you have in the class. So no questions on any of this? Yeah, you should get the syllabus. There was a little assignment for Friday, if you are still lucid after celebrating the football game. So yeah, I hope you got the syllabus, and so please do the homework assignment and just drop it on the desk. So thank you very much. Hope we'll see you all Friday.